Wait for some folks to join. Right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Today is probably a different background if you're used to seeing these webinars. I am actually in Portland, Maine, so I'm not in Columbus right now. I'm on site visiting Northeastern University and their new Institute of Experiential AI. So it's actually amazing. So if you have time to look it up, please do so. Super interesting. But today we're going to be talking about building analytics teams from scratch. I know this is a very important topic for a lot of individuals, whether you're just starting out in your organization on building up a team, or if you are new at an organization and you're just trying to scale up what your team looks like. This is a really high priority initiative. I know for a lot of people is trying to get good talent in this area. So this will be a great topic for us to kind of dive into. And so today we have Jen with us from Olive, and we will get to a more deep dive introduction of her in just a second. So we have a couple of things that we'll go through real quick before we get started. So quick agenda intro of WIA and AWS, and then of course Jen. And then she'll dive into her presentation, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So as you have questions, like always, throw them in the Q&A, and we'll definitely get to those towards the end. And then we'll close things out as usual. If you're new to WIA and these webinars, we do these series once a quarter. It's called Driving Transformation, this particular series. And basically, like I said, it's a free virtual series. We're featuring discussions on how individuals can drive transformation and change at their organization. We do it every other Wednesday. It's free, it's available, accessible online if you're a member. And I'll talk more about how to get access to the recordings then towards the end. And then a little bit about WIA. We exist to increase visibility to women making an impact in this space. And so we do lots of things like host a conference and all these webinars that we're doing as well. We launched a book last year. So anything we can do to create that platform to talk about the most pressing topics in analytics, data and analytics. And like I said, we have a membership. So if you go to community.womenandanalytics.com, you'll see all of the events we have coming up. We do career fairs, virtual career fairs quite often. So if you're job searching, stay tuned for that and subscribe to our newsletter to learn more about that. And we have a resource center. So if you're trying to do continuous learning and looking for resources, you'll be able to find some there. And so with that, I'm going to pass things over to Surbi from AWS, who's our sponsor for this series, and she'll tell you a little bit about AWS and what they're doing for women in AI and ML.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much, Reagan, and really excited to be part of the WIA series. And in particular, I think this has been like a topic that's been close to what we've been doing on teams in AI, ML, databases, and analytics at Amazon. So my name is Surbi. I am based out of the San Francisco Bay Area. And I've been with Amazon, and in particular, Amazon Web Services, AWS, for almost 4 years now. I am part of a broader team that runs several different services in both in analytics, in AI/ML, as well as some monitoring services. And we've been lucky to have have worked on several very interesting services over the last few years. Some of them you may have heard of, and like AWS Glue Data Brew, and others that are that get launched and as part of the development of these services. I think for us, like we've sort of grown as an org over time, and we continue to look for really great talent. If you're interested in databases, the likes of RDS, Redshift, or Glue. If you're interested in analytics services, again, as well as any AI/ML services like SageMaker or Personalize. There are actually a plethora of use cases that that each of these services address, and we'd love to have you come talk to us. I will be dropping some links in the chat for folks you can contact, but really you could contact McKinsey, who's on the call here as one of the organizers, or some other folks, as well as just reach out directly to me if this is interesting to you. And of course, I run a team of product and design in AWS. And then I interface very closely with several engineering leaders, as well as engineering teams, and as well as data scientists, business analysts. So there's sort of a plethora of roles that we're constantly hiring for. Thanks, and yeah, I really look forward to actually this talk by Jen Seal as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Survi. And of course, thank you to AWS for sponsoring this series. As she mentioned, they're going to drop some links in there for you. So if you're interested, please reach out to them. And so with that, couple things on webinar tips. If you're having any issues, let me know. I'll be monitoring the chat. Just send us a message. As I mentioned, there's a Q&A section. Click that and post your questions in there, and we'll get to those. That is the best thing about attending these things live, is you get to actually have access to individuals like Jen and pick her brain on things. So come up with questions for her as you're listening to the presentation and some of the Q&A at the end. And so with that, let's jump into the good stuff. So Jen is from Olive, and Olive is an absolutely extraordinary company. And right before this, we were just talking about, Jen said when she joined in June, there were 600 people, and they're at 1,200 people now, which is absolutely incredible. This company's been growing quite significantly. If you're not from the Columbus area, they're kind of headquartered here in Columbus, but they're a largely remote team, which I know Jen will be talking about. But this topic is absolutely high priority for so many people. I talked to a ton of individuals who are just trying to find good talent and figure out what skills they need to build their team out and accomplish their goal of becoming a data-driven or AI-driven organization. So with that, Jen, I'm going to pass things over to you and let you go ahead and get started. And I'm really looking forward to this presentation. So thank you.
Thanks, Regan. Let me share my screen here. Okay. Can you see my screen okay?
Yeah, it looks like we're seeing the notes screen now. With the next slide.
Interesting. Okay. 1 second. Okay, how about now?
We're now seeing I think a home screen.
Oh my goodness.
No worries.
One more, third time charm, right? All right, I don't know. Can you see my presentation now? If not, I'm just going to start talking.
I still see a home screen, unfortunately.
Okay, hold on. Let me try this. I think I got it. A new share. There. How about now?
Yep, we can see the slides 1 through 7 and the slide on your screen as well.
Okay, good. I'm just going to leave it not in presentation view because I'm afraid that it'll just restart what happened last time. So with that, I wanted to share a little bit about me. I live in Columbus, Ohio. I'm a single mother of 2. I have a 10-year-old daughter, 14-year-old son, a dog, a cat, and a fish. I love spending time with my family. I'm really into cycling, road cycling, and mountain biking. I love home improvement projects, gardening, and reading in all of my spare time. I have a lot of education. So I have I double majored in English and philosophy at Purdue University. I went on to get a master's degree in literary criticism. And then I changed fields, still at Purdue, into computer science. So I got a bachelor's in computer science. I started working in Columbus, Ohio at Lucent, and they sent me to school to get my master's degree in computer science. So a lot of education. At Lucent, I was a software developer, and then I moved over to a quality engineer, and then I moved into automated testing. That took me to Nationwide Insurance, where I did automated testing for a while. And then over the course of 10 years, I kind of had this kind of Plinko game of a career where I went from technical roles to non-technical roles, kind of business roles, project management roles, ended up kind of self-selecting into an analytics-based role, then started leading an analytics team there at Nationwide. From there, I moved to Cover My Meds, which was a very fast-growing company here in Columbus at the time. I joined to start their analytics program for their pharma clients, which is where most of the money for that company came from. So it was really exciting kind of client-focused analytics, which I hadn't really done before. I took that team from, I think there were maybe 4 people on it when I started, we organically grew to about 25 people over the course of 3 years. And then through just reorgs at the company, when I left, I think I had close to 50 people in analytics on my team. From there, I came to Olive. I've only been at Olive since June of this year. And we are, it's very exciting, very different because it's a completely remote workforce. We call it the grid. And so you can kind of work from anywhere. We actually just opened up to Canada. So it's not only the United States. I'll talk more about that later, but that presents kind of different challenges. So to prep for today's talk and kind of for what you can expect from today's talk, my audience, when I was trying to think who's the audience of this, I was thinking it's someone in a manager or director role trying to set up an analytics team from scratch, or someone who needs an analytics team, right, and is looking to kind of hire a leader for that role. Like, what would the evolution of that look like? And as I think through my career in analytics at Nationwide, Cover My Meds, and Olive, they're all snowflakes, right? So I'm sure everyone in the audience has their own kind of special circumstances. So I really tried to distill kind of a lightning round of things to consider that probably will apply in every situation, because they've applied in all 3 of my very different situations. You can see kind of on the wall over here, over the course of the last week and a half, every time something occurred to me, like, yeah, I need to cover that, I put a sticky on the wall. Then I did kind of affinity mapping into categories. And then I put those categories on these slides. So the categories, kind of main categories that I'm going to cover are how to get buy-in, which really means how do you get funding for this, right? How do you grow your staff to what you need it to be? What are the initial kind of priorities and vision setting things that will set you up for success? How do you attract the right people, and how do you keep the right people? So those are my categories. And then the last thing I just want to mention, which you probably already noticed, is I speak with my hands a lot. And so you'll see a lot of that, and I can't talk without them. So go on to the next one. So getting funding. The way that I always start this, just as a new manager, right, now when I go into a new situation, is kind of building your context diagram. And by that, I mean, if the analytics team is kind of in the center of the universe, who do you interact with in the company? And then what is the nature of those interactions, and what is kind of the health of those interactions? So by that, I mean, if there's no analytics, which I've walked into that situation before where there's not even an analytics team, there are roles that are compensating today for analytics. So who is that? Is it the engineering team? Is it the product team? Is it a combination of those both? Are they account managers? Like, who is looking at the data today? And so you can kind of begin to understand who you need to speak to, right? Who you need to prioritize in relationships. And then who do you intake stuff from? Is there a data management team, right? That you're a consumer of stuff, so you're kind of in the middle. And who are your clients, right? Your internal clients, your external clients. Just mapping out the world helps you to understand, right, where you focus next. So my next bullet item here is getting to know your peers and what their problems are. So as you look at this diagram, start setting up lunches, if you're, or virtual lunches or just meetings, to really understand where people are with data and what the problems with the data that they're experiencing today, because that will help you prioritize who you can have quick wins for. Because when you're trying to get funding, usually in my experience, right, you have, I don't know, a person, maybe 2 or 3 people under you, like to start the team. And those people have a mountain's worth of work to do. But if you can get these quick wins and get quick advocates in your peers for the work that you're doing, then they are the ones asking for you to have more resources, right? It's not you asking, it's the organization requiring you to build your team so that you can have more wins. So understanding who those people are and doing something quickly for them, right, will help you build your team more quickly. And then for me, I'm always focused on what is the most important next win, right? This one thing that's going to give me the most bang for the buck, who's going to make an advocate of someone, who's going to get someone to kind of owe me, right? Because I've solved a problem for them. There's always a ton of stuff that you could do, but you need to figure out what's the most important next thing that I can do right now. And then when you do it, you need to leverage it. I feel like a lot of people in analytics just want to do the work. They don't want to talk about the work that they've done, right? Like you need to take those wins, leverage them, and quantify the value of that work so that you can build your case for getting more team or more work, right, for a larger team to do. With that, one thing that I always do and that I found really helpful is to have a one-pager that kind of represents your team today, right? This is your current state. And then kind of on the backside of that page, a one-pager that shows your team tomorrow, right? Like what are the next things that you need to add to your team that will make you even more valuable, right? That will exponentially grow the value that your team is delivering. And then another thing that I wish I would have done in the beginning, but I didn't, and it came back to bite me time and time again, is as you're thinking about your team of tomorrow, develop a staffing model that has both kind of core people for analytics and also adds people as the volumes go up. So if you're currently, you have 25 clients, right? And then 2 years from now, you have 2 clients and you don't have the volume drivers in place, you will find yourself getting out of sync, right? And then having to ask for more resources time and time again. Whereas if your staffing model has those drivers built in, then it should just happen automatically, right? If one of your main constituents are account teams, account managers, and they're added as you add clients, then you need to stay in step with them in some way. It may not be a one-to-one, but like being very clear and thoughtful about those just makes it automatic and not a constant struggle for you to get more resources. With that, I'm going to go on to like once you're kind of in getting your resources, like what are your priorities? Like what do you start doing first? And for me, one of the things that I never do first, and I always immediately regret it, is documenting things. And by just right documentation here, I mean, don't overdo it and don't underdo it. In a data and analytics environment, like there's always a lot of complexity, a lot of nuance, a lot of this metric means exactly this and probably not what you think, right? Or things have, we may have 4 metrics that are all different kind of flavors of the same thing. And so you really need to know the details. those things need to be documented immediately. And as you're kind of exploring problems, right, or exploring relationships, you need to get other people's eyes on those so they begin to see what the nuances are and begin to, oh, actually, that's not quite right. Right? Like the more things are documented, the more people can absorb and respond to them. So in an analytics environment, you can't wait on that. That needs to begin immediately. Another thing is kind of, and I'm sure everyone in this room knows this, right? But you need to build and maintain a solid foundation, and you don't always start out with one. You have, in every environment that I've been in, right, there's a lot of technical debt, and you need to figure out how to get that addressed. And especially in a high growth environment, no one wants to talk about tech debt, right? Like that's just, it's unsexy to talk about that, to fund it, right? It's like, oh, we're doing okay, let's keep limping along. And so one thing that I find works really well is to not address it as technical debt, address it as building for the future, right? You have this brave new world, the shiny vision, right, that you need to accomplish. We have to do this thing, and then just build the tech debt into that project plan, so that you're always talking about the shiny thing that you're going to deliver, and not kind of the mountain that you need to overcome to do that. Just bake it in. Another thing that I cannot stress enough is that you should prioritize self-service as much as possible. Get the right tools in place. I've always been in a Tableau shop. I think it's an intuitive, easy to use, easy to understand tool with a lot of capability, but whatever, right, whatever your organization will get for you, the more self-service analytics you build out, it's a non-linear expansion of the capabilities of not only your team, but the organization. So if you can have self-service and then teach product managers how to fish, right? Like what do they see in that? Teach engineering how to look at things, teach, account managers, teach leadership how to find the answers themselves. I guarantee everyone who looks at your self-service analytics comes with a different perspective, different background, different point of view, and they will see very different things in the data than what probably your team, right? What you and your team see when you look at that data. So getting it in everyone's hands and making sure they understand the nuances of it, and making sure that everyone is in sync with that data will pay dividends for you and your team. Another kind of tip for organizing is organizing your team around kind of the necessary competencies for where you are now. So for me, at Cover My Meds, we started off with, we had reporting and we had kind of client-facing people. And so, we started there because that was necessary. And then I realized, well, we don't really have, if my client people are spending all of their time kind of chasing down these kind of product questions. So if I had product analysts who were the owners and the source of truth on the product, then it would free up my client people to actually spend time on the clients and not having to do all of this background work. So then we started building out the client organization. And from there, they were kind of ramping up in kind of the marketing and kind of value engineering type roles. And we didn't really have someone with that expertise. So building out kind of a value analytics and like understanding how to interact, like how to leverage what we learned from clients and leverage what we know from products into a value story that marketing could use was, a competency in and of itself that we were able to kind of build out. I talked about self-service already, but as you kind of progress, there are people who are just amazing, not only in Tableau, but in like linking everything together and telling us like your self-service analytics tool will become like a product in and of itself that needs to be managed as a product. And so having someone with that vision and mindset of, you don't want 4,000 different self-service dashboards for every person's needs, right? You want a set that people can navigate and understand where to go for what. So having someone there to kind of shepherd that along and own it will be really important. The the reporting environments are always, right, like that is a competency in and of itself, and having a team kind of dedicated to that and the care and feeding of that, and making sure, you know, someone to go to for reporting, making sure that you're meeting all of your SLAs, like having that as its own thing rather than kind of distributed among the team just makes all the difference. And then for me, I always want to kind of, this new and weird was an actual kind of category that we had at Cover My Meds, because we had so many, like, product and or engineering would be working on something and then they'd deliver it, and we weren't, like, analytics wasn't involved in it until it kind of reached the client, and the client's like, well, great, what sort of reporting will I get on this? How do I know that this is working? And then they'd come to us and be like, oh, can you report on this? It's like, wait, what? That's never going to happen again, right? So having someone who is constantly there to help engineering, help product, make sure that analytics is represented and thought about and implemented in such a way that on day one we can do the reporting, right, or do the product analytics on it, like, it made all of the difference. And so you are going to have pain points or things that happen in your organization that, you know, present new competencies for you, and if you organize your team around those competencies, then it's really easy to scale within them and also scale your team over time organically. Another thing that comes up, that has come up in every situation where I've set up a team, is that typically there's an infrastructure team, like a data management team, that is just a skeleton crew, bare bones skeleton crew. I like to call it running a marathon in stilettos, right? Because the entire organization, the entire analytics organization is dependent upon these three people who have to prioritize their time, right? And, like, build out things that we require, my team would require. And so it's like, you have to advocate for that team to be properly resourced. And, right, otherwise we're running a marathon in stilettos. Like, those three people are holding everyone hostage because they just can't do that work. So let's spread it out, have a nice footprint so that everyone, you know, everyone can succeed and get their work done. And if you come in and start advocating for infrastructure to be properly resourced, right, you're going to make a friend. And then that will, right, that will help you further down the road. And then another thing that, you know, at Olive and at Cover My Meds, it was very client oriented analytics, is this idea, I call it urgent analytics, right? Which it doesn't really go together. Like, typically analysts want to take their time and really understand things. But urgent analytics, you know, is just kind of a reality, and it can be possible if you have kind of this separation of duties. So for us, we had kind of client-facing folks who really understood the nuances of the client and could explore questions in a one-off way, in a manual way, right? They could get that. But once they got it, they had to send it over to the another team to kind of operationalize it, right? Otherwise, you grind to a halt because once you do something once in analytics, right, then they want to see it weekly or monthly, or, right, they want to see it again. And so don't sign up for that manual work, right? You always want to explore and then operationalize if it's something that makes sense. So separating those two and having those two that can work together will set you up for success. All right, so finding the right people. I always like to talk about this, like my teams, as building the Avengers, right? I want a team of superheroes, each with their own strengths, that can collaborate and work together to solve a problem. And one of the first things that, and it took me a while to learn this, one of the first things to attracting the right people is having compelling job descriptions. And depending on your organization, you may, like when I was at Nationwide, it was very templated. I had like this much space to fill out a job description, and then everything else was just kind of boilerplate template stuff that would go on for pages. Luckily, you know, at Olive and at Cover My Meds, I had more leeway to create job titles and job descriptions and really make them my own, and make them and write them in such a way that people were interested in the opportunity, right? Because it was different, and it highlighted different skills than they were used to seeing. And then I got people who were a better fit for my team. So if you're able, I would definitely spend the time to make that your own. I think people really anchor on it, and it will make a big difference in the quality of folks that you get and the culture fit that you get. So the interviewing process is super important and complex. And I have a number of things that I just kind of keep in mind that I wanted to highlight here. One is involve the team in that, right? It's not just you. Like you want to have a personality fit, a culture fit, a technical skills fit for the entire team. And if you have 20 people on your team, you don't want a panel of 20, but 2 or 3 people in addition to you in a panel interview will make a big difference. And as a candidate, I like to see that when I'm interviewing. I like to see how people interact and how they, are they joking around or is it very formal? And a lot of times you can't tell in a one-on-one setting, but you can when you have multiple people from the team there. At Cover My Meds, we kind of had a 3-step process. So I would work with a recruiter and the recruiter would do the initial screening. So they would figure out like, here's what I'm looking for. Here's the job description. Here's the 3 things that are most important to me. And they would do kind of a phone screening with people to say like, I think this is a good fit. And then the second step of the process for the people that they would tee people up to me. And then if I thought they were also a good fit, we would have an hour-long panel interview with them. And we had, very non-standard questions, I guess. It wasn't like, oh, tell me about a time, right? It wasn't all behavioral and it wasn't all technical. Really in that first interview, we're looking for kind of what is their personality and what is their cultural fit. And if we like that and we thought that they would be a good fit, then we had what we call the code day, where we would have them come in and do work on a problem for us. And the things that we organized the code day around things that we wanted to see. And that was, we gave them a problem and we built in a ton of time for questions. So someone would visit them for 15 minutes, every hour to answer any questions that they had. And that was very much part of the interview because our culture was you needed to be curious and you needed to ask questions. You weren't going to be able to figure this out on your own. And we wanted people to kind of iterate. We didn't tell them this, right? But we wanted them to be like, okay, I'm doing this. Like, what's right about this? What's wrong about this, right? And it helped us to ensure that we were getting the people that were going to succeed on our team. And then we had a readout. So they had to read out their work and we would do, if they were client facing, we would pretend to be the clients and we would ask a bunch of questions about what they did. Then we would give them like a little bit of time, half an hour, like, hey, if that was a real client meeting based on the questions that we asked, what would you do next? Like, what would your next steps be? And it was really interesting for us to see what they were paying attention to and if they were able to absorb our questions and how they prioritized their next steps. And we learned more about the candidates through those personal interactions than we did like with their technical skills. Couple things that we were looking for in there, and you've probably heard of this before, but like you're looking for T's. So a person who's a T, so they have a deep knowledge in one thing, right, that you are looking for, but they also have broad knowledge in other things. So that kind of goes back to the Avenger, right? Like the Hulk is really good at one thing, but he can kind of flex into some other stuff. So you're looking for T's, but we're also looking for like V's. So people who have really technical knowledge in one area, but pretty deep knowledge in a bunch of areas, or W's, right? So like a manager would be a W, where you've done something really well, you have this broad experience, and then you're also able to manage people. So right there, it doesn't just have to be a T. We're really looking for that mix. And as a team, like as a manager, the hiring manager, you need to see who is this person and how do their skills fit in with the rest. Because if you think of those T's kind of making your team being kind of a wheel, right? And then the T's are like going down to the spoke, like you need to space those out. So you're looking for someone with deep technical knowledge in one area, but they also, right, the other pieces need to fit into place. The other thing as a hiring manager that I look for and try to assess in the interview is what I call growth patterns. So maybe you've seen this before, where people just naturally do kind of a stair step. So if you think of the rise and run of a stair, like your growth pattern as an employee is when you're doing the rise, you're learning new things. So it's really hard, right? It's a hard climb. And then once you get to the step, the run, you know how to do that. You're competent and you're the expert now, right? And so you're kind of coasting. It's not that hard, but you're enjoying being an expert and you're enjoying being competent. And people have different patterns. So some people, they want to learn one thing and then they want to feel competent for a long time, or they have other things going on in their lives and they just want to feel competent at work, right? Other people are on this, like, they are going to get to the top as quickly as possible, right? And they don't want to spend any time on the runs. So they just want to learn. And then they have very, steep stairs. I'm looking for both on my team. Like, I don't want, if I hired all of the climbers, they would burn out quickly on my team, right? Like, they would burn through all of the positions on my team and then leave over the course of a year, which is great. Like, I need those people because they have a lot of energy, they have a lot of drive, they can get a lot of stuff done. But I also need the people who can hang out for a while so that I have consistency, right? And I have someone to train others on the team. So I need a mix, and I'm looking for that during the interview process. And then, I think this is from I can't remember her name, but the woman who cleans out houses, declutters houses, right? Like, what sparks joy? I need a mix of that on the team. And so I'm asking questions and I'm listening for answers. Like, in the first interview and in the code day, I'm looking for a connection between what they said and what they do. Like, what sparks joy for them on the team? Like, is it, they need to tell the story, right? They're a great storyteller and they're compelling the audience and they're very engaging. Or is it the person who needs to find the story? They don't really want to tell it, right? But they want to find it, and that sparks joy for them. There's some people who, they just love making sure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, right? They're just really excellent at tedious tasks and they're looking for the minute details, right? Trying to find the little bugs. I need someone like that on the team because a lot of people hate doing that. And I want someone who's going to thrive in the job that I have for them and not hate work every day because they can't stand looking right cell by cell in a spreadsheet. Another thing that I see, especially as I have managers that I'm getting up to speed, is that in these interviews, they're really looking for reasons to say yes. And I approach it like I'm looking for reasons to say no. I'm trying to disqualify people as early as possible because I don't want to waste their time or my time. Like, the interviews are really expensive for me and they're really expensive for the candidate, right? So if I have some red flags in the panel interview, I'm just going to pass. I don't want to waste time. And I feel like that's something that people don't want to do, right? Like, oh, I think maybe they'll fit. Let's give them another chance. Like, don't think about it as giving them another chance, right? Think about it as like, if I'm not positive right now, they're not going forward. And the kind of related to that is like, learn the max that you can from the candidate in a minimum amount of time, right? Be considerate. I've had friends recently who've gone on one company will have them back 6, 7, 8 times. That is terrible, right? I would your job as a hiring manager is to figure it out and then take a chance based on what you know. So I think, the third interview, that's enough. You need to organize yourself to get as much information as possible to make the decision by then. One thing that I find interesting, I said that future, that one pager of your current state and then the one pager of your future state. When I interview people, I share that. I talk about here's my team now, here's my vision for the future, and here's where you would fit into that. Here's where I see you fitting in. It's really compelling to people. I've had people who worked for me 2-3 years ago talk about if I run into them, right, and they talk about working for me, they talk about that vision and that's what gets them, right? It's like someone having the vision, I know where we are, I know what the problems are, I know where we're going. share that with people, because that's how you're going to attract the right people to fit into your problems. And then just one of my favorite quotes, and this is, around hiring, is like, you get a knack for it over time. Like, good judgment in hiring comes from experience, which often comes from bad judgment, right? It's the ones where you get it wrong. You got it wrong. And now you have to deal with, having a bad fit on your team. That's probably going to be your best educational tool for getting it right in the future. So if you do get it wrong, right, you're going to have to deal with it, but learn from it. Like, how could you have gotten that right? What could you have asked or done different up front to get the right person in the first place, right? So you should be constantly changing and evolving your interview techniques based on the people that you have in place. So keeping the right people. So now that you got the right people, right, what do you need to do to keep them? And for me, it's really understanding what people's strengths are and letting them play to their strengths. So if you're lucky enough to have multiple positions open at a time on your team, like, that's when I feel like I've gotten my best people, because I interview someone for one role and I can see that it's not their strengths are different. And I also need those, right? So, and I'm able to hire them for a job that I didn't have posted because of who they are, right? So I've kind of built a role around the person and their strengths. And now we're both committed to making that work. Another thing that I see a lot on analytics teams is not really distributing ownership of things, so that I always think of that Lucille Ball chocolate factory thing, where you just kind of have an assembly line and people are expected to just grab work and do it. I find that really unsatisfying as an employee, and like most of the people that I know, very unsatisfying. So giving people ownership of big things, right? Like, dev plans for me are based on experiential growth. Like, I'm developing when I'm actually doing it. It's not reading a book. It's not going to a class, right? It's having the opportunity to do it. And so having people on your team own things and letting them experience what that means keeps people really engaged. You also need to build a bench. So you have you right size the skill level to the work being done. This is, for me, one of the most rewarding things about building a team is having junior people, right? Mid-level people, senior people. The senior people get to flex their their leadership skills, their manager skills by bringing other people on board, and then, right, inspecting their work and making sure that they're doing things the right way. Whereas for me, reporting is one of the places where that is a great way to build skills of someone who's just entering your organization, just entering the workforce, right? It's an entry level thing. As long as you have a senior person who's directing the work, if you have entry level people doing it, they are so passionate and excited about it. Whereas if you had just a senior level person having to do all of that work, they would not have any energy for it. And so when you right size the skill level to the work, it's energizing for everyone. And then always develop leads, develop managers. And I had a manager who talked about monkeys. I don't know if you've heard this analogy, but people come into your office and they have problems, right? And you take their problems away, their monkey gets off their back and onto your back, right? And then at the end of the day, you have 17 monkeys on your back that you need to deal with. Don't let people give you their monkeys, right? Tell them what to do to get rid of their own monkeys. Build a really sticky culture on your team, right? A team culture with habits and rituals, however that looks. So do you have daily stand-ups? Do you have a non-work related Slack channel? Do you do celebrations for anniversaries or birthdays, right? Having very specific feedback loops that build the habit of figuring out what's going on. Checking in on dev plans for people to see where are they in there, right? Are they getting bored with what they're doing? Do they need an opportunity? And then, this is kind of an example of a team ritual that kind of got built into our vernacular, but we used to do an all-day strategy meeting with the team at one of the metro lodges here in town. And it was referred to as the lodge meeting. So we had kind of lodge meeting topics That's a strategic topic, right? A strategic initiative. Oh, let's talk about that at the lodge meeting. All of those things just made things sticky for the people on the team and made them feel like, they belonged there. It's interesting. It took me a long time to get into management. I was an individual contributor for a lot of my career because I didn't think that it would be rewarding, I guess. Like, I like to solve the problems. So I think paying attention, like all of these different things that I've talked about here with the people who work for you, like paying attention to all of that is like a unique problem in itself to solve, right? With a lot of moving pieces, kind of like a chess game that you have to stay ahead of everyone working. So like paying attention to all of that and knowing this last point, when it's time for people to leave, like you have to help people leave your team, move up through your team, right? When you're building that bench, make sure that there's levels that people can stay, people can move from one competency to another so that they're constantly experience growth. And then if you're paying attention, when it's time for someone to leave, either because they've learned everything here, they've checked all the boxes and they should move someplace else and become an advocate for your team, or because they're just not a good fit and you have to help them find another team that's a better fit for the skills that they have. As a manager, like if you're not doing that, then it reduces the efficacy of your team, and it certainly reduces the joy that people feel of being part of your team. All right, quick, I'm sorry, I know this is going long. My final thoughts are that growth applies to you as well. So if you're the manager, if you are the director of this team, like you need to have your own goals and your own development plan and your own succession plan, right? I don't assume that you're going to stay there forever. So all of that applies to you. And then find peers or mentors to connect with and chat. And I would love to, if you want to reach out to me, I love to talk about this. Finally, I'm hiring at Olive. Right now, I have a data engineer role open. We're a fully remote workforce. So you can work from anywhere in the United States. So if you're interested, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to talk to you. I guess I'll hand it back to you, Reagan.
Awesome. I have like a million questions. I've been taking notes while you've been talking. So I know we'll get to those in just a second. I wanted to give an opportunity for some of the attendees to ask questions as well. So we got a question that came in. It says, great presentation. Thank you. Can you speak about the business domain knowledge and its role in the success of the analytics function?
Yeah, interestingly, I need people who can learn the business domain quickly. I don't think that you necessarily have to have it day one, right? So like when I think about domain knowledge on Cover My Meds, most of the people that I hired came from other domains. This was their first foray into healthcare. But we paired with people with a lot of expertise within the organization. And so especially looking at, like, if you build out your self-service, right, you partner with all of the people with the domain knowledge, then that gets built into your knowledge, right? And gets built into your documentation, gets built into your metrics, and then you start to see things in a different way. However, that's one of the reasons that I say self-service is so important, because people with strong, like, clinical domain knowledge are going to see something completely different than you do in the data.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off of this, because this idea of self-service, especially as people are getting started, there's always this huge challenge of like building something from scratch. Like if you're building up a new capability, you kind of want to govern and make sure people are using it right. And, you kind of want to almost protect it in a sense to make sure it doesn't get, if you're building kind of bad quality things, or bad quality things are getting out, then there's this like trust factor that you have to balance. And so I'm curious from you, like, as you're building it out, what is the balance between we own this, we're going to do it for now, versus we're making this more open and we'll train you and we'll make sure you're using it right, and building your team to support that, versus them saying, we'll just get our own analyst? Like what's the balance there?
Yeah, one of the things that we did was when we were building out our self-service, until it was completely certified, right? Until like everyone had seen it, it's blessed. We did not put it in client colors. So we did kind of grayscale. So it looked different than what you would show to a client. And then once it was blessed, then we had all of the marketing, the branding colors on it. And so like if something was in grayscale, people just knew right away that they couldn't share it. And we had kind of a little documentation of like, I can't remember what we, certified, right? This was certified. They called it seal of approval as a play on my last name, but like it was certified, right? But like, you don't want just a little emblem. Like you don't want people just zeroing in on a little emblem. So we had kind of a test environment where we would just play around with our stuff. And then we had kind of a larger kind of user test environment where we're getting people's feedback on things, and then it would go into a certified state.
Yeah, that's great. That's interesting. I've not heard of the like grayscale versus because I've seen a lot of people do certification. They just put this little logo on it that's like certified, but people don't really pay attention to that, and it doesn't hold a lot of weight in a lot of cases, especially if they really want to use it. So no, that's super interesting. Another question we often get is like, how do you get a seat at the table strategically? Like, especially as you're starting this type of team, to like get the support you need and get that opportunity to communicate value so that you can get more funding and actually build out what you need to build.
Yeah, and that's where your peers are going to become so important. If you're solving your peers' problems and you can have them tell your boss that you're solving the problems and them advocating for you, you get a seat at the table, right? No matter where. I feel like at Cover My Meds, when I started, I was in operations. So someone had, like my boss had a seat at the table. I didn't necessarily. So she had engineering and analytics and something else. I don't know, just kind of, it was all operations. But very quickly, as we started having wins, right? And like, we're adding this value. Then she's like, well, I want you to talk about this in the meeting. And then you're talking about it in the meeting. And then other people want, right, something like that. And then all of a sudden you're invited to sit at the table. So
yeah, it's so important then to establish that early credibility and wins that you're talking about to get that momentum, because it's really hard to do. Yeah, that's great. We got another question from the audience, which was, how do you find the right shiny thing to focus on?
Yeah, pay attention to what people are saying. So your boss, whoever hired you, right? Your boss probably has a problem that they want to solve, or maybe it's your boss's boss that has a problem that they want to solve, right? But like, find the thing that is either going to get you a favor, get someone, someone in your debt, solve some problem, or have like something that's easy to quantify, the value of, because you're going to want to do that.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And sometimes it's hard to figure out what's valuable too. But I think to your point, just having those types of conversations continuously with people will help unravel that. There's another question that said, approximately how many years in the industry did you spend before feeling like you were competent to become a manager? Which I know is top of mind for so many practitioners.
A lot. 10, probably half of my career. And then interestingly, I was in a role at Nationwide that was called a strategic operations leader, which I love. The SOL was the acronym for that. But you were the chief of staff for one of the, it's like senior vice presidents. And so I sat on his cabinet as an individual contributor. I sat on his cabinet and helped to lead kind of his strategic efforts. And that's what made me want to be a manager, because I'm like, after that, like, I don't want to, like, I want to be involved at that strategic level. And sitting through all of those meetings helped me understand from a bird's eye view, what leaders think the job of a manager is, which is very different from like what people actually think the job is like when you move up to it. So I had kind of those success criteria in mind when I kind of made the leap to manager role.
Yeah, so you got a taste of it. I do see a lot of people who go into management roles and then they're like,
they hate
and they
it,
kind of
right?
go back. Yeah, they go back
Yeah,
right back to what they were comfortable with.
It's very different. Like it would be great if you were really close to your boss and you could have kind of radical candor about helping to coach and support you through the transition to manager, because it's rough. It's not what you think it is, but you can still find joy in it. It still can be very challenging, but you're going to hate some parts of
it. For sure. No, that's great. I know we have a few minutes left. I want to get a couple of these other questions into you. So you mentioned, I know like recruiting and retention are top of mind for so many people right now for good talent. And so you can either spend the time and the money to get people who have the skills you're looking for in-house, or, there's this whole topic around upskilling and educating individuals. And so how do you as a manager carve out time to come up with a strategy for that? What does that look like for you? And how do you balance that with everything else you have going on, trying to lead these initiatives at your organization?
Yeah, it's a lot, but it can be, you have to look at it as like a win-win opportunity. Like as a manager, so at Cover My Meds, I was director level, and I got the advice that as a director level, you should spend a third of your time managing up, a third of your time managing your peers, and a third of your time managing your team. So if you think about that, someone else is managing your team, right? Because you can't spend a third of the time. So when you're adding people, and we did this, we hired people from support at Cover My Meds and trained them. We tried to identify analytically minded people and we trained them to become analysts. Someone else is doing that training. And so you have to look at it as like, I am upskilling the leadership and managerial skills of someone on my team, right? While they are trying to train someone to do the job that they do now. So my effort is in coaching the manager, right? Or the lead of that team. I need people in place who have the capacity to do that, right? And have the skills to do that and the desire. So I would not as a manager take on anyone, or as a director, take on anyone that I would need to teach technical skills. I don't have the time to do that. So you have to make sure that the person that you're asking to do that has the time and the bandwidth, or you need to create it for them. But it's super rewarding. Like it changed the whole tenor of our team to have these people who are just so excited for the opportunity, right? To learn and grow and want to, like, everyone loved that model. So I'll definitely be doing it again.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so interesting. I read some research recently that said that on average, each employee has about like 24 minutes a week for learning, and that's just so crazy to me. So like the fact that you kind of broke it down like that is really fascinating, especially as a manager. But I know we're heading towards the end real quick. I, of course, thank you so much for preparing this. I know you put a lot of thought into that presentation. You have tons of experience in this area, and I know for a fact I got tons of value out of it. So thank you so much for putting this together and sharing this with everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, and before everyone drops, we've got the next one coming up in 2 weeks. Tina Sieber, she's the Chief Analytics Officer at Gothy Analytics. She's going to be kind of elaborating and expanding on sustaining and executing on data and analytics teams today. So we'll have more of this discussion in the next couple of weeks. And this recording will be available as well for individuals on our platform, so community.womeninaanalytics.com. So Jen, thanks again. And thank you everybody for joining. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Thank you.
Thanks.